Outnumbered. I'm Julie Banderas, and here today, Carly Shimkus, Fox News Headlines 24/7 reporter, Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio host and Fox News contributor, Tommy Lauren, Fox News Nation host of No Interruption, and in the center virtual seat for the very first time, Rob Smith, Turning Point USA spokesman and senior contributor and an Iraq War veteran. I'll get to all of you in a moment, but first let's just talk about the fact that squad member Cori Bush kicking off the verbal fireworks over the weekend, tweeting, when they say that the 4th of July is about American freedom, remember this: the freedom they're referring to is for white people. This land is stolen land, and black people still aren't free. Congressional candidate Strahid Buttar backing her up, tweeting, it's almost as if our entire country has been brainwashed to ignore our history and how its worst elements continue today despite our self-congratulatory rhetoric. The media getting in on the action, too, with NPR taking aim at the Declaration of Independence, tweeting 245 years ago today, leaders representing 13 British colonies signed a document to declare independence. It says that all men are created equal, but women, enslaved people, indigenous people, and many others were not held as equal at the time. The Washington Post going even further, posting several opinion pieces blasting the holiday with titles like "The 4th is for complainers," among others. This on the heels of the New York Times op-ed that suggested the American flag is now a symbol of divisiveness. I mean, talk about happy birthday, America. What in the Leslie, heck? The 4th of July is a day to celebrate America and our freedom and all those who migrated here to live in the land of the free. How is that racist?
Well, first of all, when we first, on July 4th, declared our independence, not everyone in this country was free. African Americans were enslaved. They didn't come here for a better life of their own choosing. They came here on ships in chains. So that historically is accurate. One of the things that is great about our nation, and I think makes us greater than any other country in the world, is that we have the freedom, maybe not to like our anthem, maybe not to like a holiday, maybe not to like our flag. It doesn't mean you don't like the country. It means that you have a problem perhaps with a holiday, you have a problem perhaps with history, for some not being taught they feel accurately. So I think that the celebration of what can unite us is not necessarily a flag or a song or even a holiday, but our freedom, and 4th of July is certainly that, to celebrate it. And, you know, men and women have died for people to speak out against this very holiday, quite frankly.
Right. Deadly violence marring July 4th weekend in some of our nation's cities. In Chicago, at least 82 people reportedly shot since Friday evening. 14 of them were killed, including 19-year-old National Guard soldier Chris Carvajal. His family says he was not in any gang and was home just visiting after just completing basic training. Carvajal wanted to become a police officer when he turned 21. Here in New York City, police are looking for this attacker who they say slashed a female tourist near Times Square on her chest and hand after he ignored his catcalls. She was just walking by, minding her own business. They say he also attacked another person on a train. This is the result of the police having absolutely no control of the thieves. The New York Times, the New York Daily News rather, reading the headline, "Red, White, and Blood," pointing out the city has seen a rampage of violence and murder. Despite crime spikes in liberal cities, the White House doubling down on blaming Republicans for the crime surge.
The president ran on and won the most votes of any candidate in history on a platform of boosting funding for law enforcement after Republicans spent decades trying to cut the cops program.
Leslie, I want your take on Jen Psaki's remarks about blaming Republicans for the continued rise in crime. And I just want to mention again that the rise in crime continues, and it's not just under this administration. And now they're pointing the fingers at Republicans when, I mean, in the cities where the crime is highest is in fact run by Democrats. So then how are Republicans to blame for that?
Well, there's a couple of things here. Actually, and thank you, Tommy, because you actually helped make my point. Nashville is not a liberal city. Tennessee's certainly not a liberal state. Fort Worth, Miami, two cities where you have a Republican mayor, two cities that are in states where you have Republican governors. They have surging numbers.
Nashville
we had
is
numbers
run by
higher
Democrats,
in New York.
though, by the way. I just want to correct you.
Excuse me. Okay, thank you. In New York City and in the rest of the country, we're not, even though these numbers are terrible, these crimes are horrific, and anybody hurt or killed, certainly, it's just disgusting. But the numbers are not what we saw in the 90s, and there wasn't a defund the police movement there. There's not a defund the police movement in Republican cities. Criminologists say there are a number of factors, whether it's more guns on the street, seasonal, COVID, but the disrespect toward the police does play into that, quite frankly. And President Biden has always maintained that he is not in favor of defunding the police, and Jen Psaki has said that over and over and over. The president has said from the COVID relief bill, take that $350 billion that are for state and local governments and use that to beef up your police force.
I want to check in with Americans.
I don't like the blame game, quite frankly, but Republicans have taken credit for legislation that they have not voted to pass, and some of that funding will help police in their states and in their cities.
Let's check performance during the PBS 4th of July special getting torn apart on social media over a controversial song choice. Williams closing out the show with Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is sometimes referred to as the, quote, Black National Anthem. Critics calling it a woke and divisive inclusion for the broadcast. Williams dedicated the song to those who came before. I mean, it was nicknamed the Black National Anthem, Leslie. And you know, as Rob points out, this is nothing new. And it is a nod to Juneteenth, which I'm glad that you brought up, that in fact that was something that the president had talked about making a federal holiday, and this year it did become one. Leslie, what do you make of those on social media that have hit out at it, calling it woke and divisive?
Rob, you and I agree 100% on this, and you stole my Lincoln reference. But, you know, when you look past celebrations of the 4th of July, whether they'd been televised or not back in those days, we have other songs that our nation loves. America the Beautiful, God Bless America. They're not the national anthem, but they are considered to be woven in the fabric of our nation. And this song is as well, especially in the African-American community. This isn't about being woke. Look, President Biden said to the African-American community when he won the election, you had my back, I will have yours. Juneteenth has just been passed as a holiday. It is the first time in the first 4th of July where it is a holiday. I think it's very appropriate that this song was included. And quite frankly, we have so many songs that are included, again, like the two I had mentioned. It doesn't replace our national anthem at all. They're just other songs that actually help us to lift our voices, if you will, and sing how wonderful and great this nation is. And I wasn't surprised about the outrage, but I was disappointed.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is blaming racism for gold medal hopeful Sha'Carri Richardson's month-long suspension after testing positive for marijuana in last month's Olympic trials. The squad member also slamming the International Swimming Federation's rejection of a swim cap designed for natural black hair, tweeting the criminalization and banning of cannabis is an instrument of racist and colonial policy. The IOC should reconsider its suspension of Ms. Richardson and any athletes penalized for cannabis use. This ruling, along with IOC denial of swim caps for natural hair, is deeply troubling. All right, so there's a lot to unpack there because her criticism is twofold. But Leslie, I mean, any athlete knows the rules going into the Olympic trials that you can't do any kind of drugs, whether it be marijuana, whether it be steroids, and whether you be white, whether you are black. I mean, so where does race then, where does the race card play a role in here? Do you believe that this has anything to do with race, or is this just an unfortunate circumstance where we're talking about a black athlete who tested positive for marijuana?
I don't think with marijuana that it's racist, because I do think if she had been white, the same punishment would be imposed. The Olympics give a couple of reasons why with marijuana. One,
Michael Phelps is a great example that Tommy just brought up.
Right.
Keep going. I'm sorry.
Marijuana is not. No worries. Marijuana is not a performance-enhancing drug, as we know, but the Olympics does care about the health of the athlete, and they also care about the image of the Olympics. Now, here's where I would move away from that. I do think that because not just the state that she was in, and you have more than a dozen states in this country, and you have almost 10 countries that are in the Olympics that have legalized marijuana, whether for recreational or medicinal purposes or both. That perhaps the Olympics is out of touch with where we are, but right now those are the rules. Yep. And I don't think that's racist. I do think that the swim cap is discriminatory, specifically toward people of color, and even more so specifically toward African Americans, and that does bother me, and that does seem to be racist where the marijuana does not.
Over the past 100 years, the Statue of Liberty has stood tall as tens of millions of immigrants arrived in America through nearby Ellis Island. For them, she was a symbol of freedom, inspiration, and hope, a reassuring sign that they had arrived in the land of their dreams. But now, according to a Washington Post writer, she's a, quote, meaningless symbol of hypocrisy because of America's history of racism, sexism, and anti-immigrant sentiment. The essay is titled, "Maybe It's Time to Admit That the Statue of Liberty Has Never Quite Measured Up." The writer argues, quote, "Familiar to some Americans as the flag, the statue is just as meaningless or foreign to others, a sign without significance, or worse, a symbol of hypocrisy or unfulfilled promises. If the statue has had any kind of stable meaning over its lifetime, it is not as a symbol of liberty, but as a symbol of the misuse of liberty, as a hollow promise, unequally distributed and limited in its application to certain groups." And Leslie, I was looking at some Twitter comments, and I saw one person say, "Last month I visited the island to see the Statue of Liberty. My white family was in the minority. The majority seemed to be from people all over the world." So what do you think about this debate?
Well, first of all, I am a liberal, I am a Democrat, and I don't like when people say this is liberals. No, this is one person who wrote an op-ed, and an op-ed is what? An opinion piece, which our First Amendment gives this individual the right to write. It also gives me the right to disagree, and I do wholeheartedly disagree. I love the Statue of Liberty. I've been by it on a speedboat, a ferry. I've been in it. I've been up it, at the base of it. And when I lived in New York years ago, every time somebody visited, that's where they wanted to go. I've been there so many times, and she's beautiful. Look, when she talks about, quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." I didn't want to paraphrase. That's why people come here. Some people come here legally, and some people come here and seek asylum, seek refugee status. And that's one of the reasons, because they believe what she is asking. Now, there are some people in our current situation with immigration in this country that I can see might being a bit of a Debbie Downer when it comes to the Statue of Liberty, but nobody on the left, just because one person wrote this, is trying to cancel the Statue of Liberty. She'll be here long after all of us on this panel are dead, buried, and gone, in my opinion. And by the way, the right has canceling as well. Just ask Liz Cheney.